to you and speak to some of our entrepreneurial ventures over the years. And just want to start off and just say thank you. Today's talk really is about just what God's done in our lives. It's not what we've done. We believe that everything we've accomplished in life is through the blessings of God and His Son, Jesus Christ. And so we're humbled to be here to speak to some of those things. Tonight will be mostly about our lessons in business, but some even lessons in our marriage.
We have all heard the phrase self-made man. There is no such thing. No one succeeds in business, marriage, or life without the blessing of God, whether you know it or not. Yes, we have a part, but as in Deuteronomy 8:18 says, but remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth. Our ability to learn, our attitudes, where we were born, our determination is all God-given. Our families help create a worldview, a lens through which we see the world. This family-shaped lens impacts our view of money, business, our jobs, an endless list that makes us who we are. We live a joyful gratitude. This is our car tax. Kyle is grateful, and I'm grateful too. That's also like the second car, but as in also.
It's good to see Andy Shuey tonight. I'm trying to think how many decades, Andy, since I saw you last. It's been a long time. And you remember swimming in our pool on Sooner Drive back in the 70s. So it goes back a long time. My first business was a men's clothing store in Fairview, Oklahoma. An expensive men's clothing store in Fairview, Oklahoma. Went through a couple semesters in school, did horrible, decided I want to go into business for myself. I opened my clothing store, I believe it was in fall of '82, and closed in the late winter of '83. $50,000 in debt, getting ready to get married. For the first time in my life, I felt like a failure. Senior class president, homecoming captain, didn't really have to study. I should have. But I found myself at that point in life going like, what happened? Well, the truth is, I didn't know what I was doing. But it was the greatest lesson of my life. Carol and I took 6 years to pay back those loans at the bank, but we made every payment on time. I was in debt in every area of my life: credit cards, small student loan, clothing store, and yet my bride still married me, knowing all that. Carol and I really are partners. We work so well together. It's hard to believe in 40 years of marriage, not once have we had a money fight. Not once. After the clothing store closed, I went to work roughnecking overnight, did that for about 6 months. Then went to work for Gold Spot Dairy delivering milk. Did that for about 1.5 years. At the end of that time, I found a convenience store for sale in Ringwood, Oklahoma. And you know what? My dad didn't give up on me. He was willing to sign a bank loan to get us into business. And that's all it took. Carol and I worked together, built a business, started to make a lot of money. Carol had been going to school at Southwestern in Weatherford, getting up at 5 a.m. in the morning, opening one of my dad's stores, 7 o'clock driving to Weatherford. But we worked together. Carol graduated, and then we were ready to start a family, and moved to Enid. When I look back on the clothing store, and I didn't coin this phrase, so I'm not saying I did, I just don't know who said it. It's not a failure if you learn from it. But if you fail to learn, it is a failure. And what I learned was a deep pain in me that said I would never do that again.
We're an anomaly, no doubt. The number of businesses we have owned and operated over the years is not normal. Kyle is ADD and likes a variety of challenges. He would struggle to work on a project for 8 hours, but could handle 1 or 2 hours if he was really interested. He does not like repetitive work, so operating multiple companies is right into his own strength. Every day at work presents new opportunities and challenges. No 2 days are the same. Before preparing for this talk, we had never really sat down and counted or put business experience on paper. So it was kind of humbling to look back and remember all that God had done in our lives.
These make no sense, these kind of businesses, but this is what we've done through God's blessing in our life. This is just a partial list. I started out with my men's clothing store, a raging success. We bought a travel agency, which was a lot of fun, a lot of travel perks back then. That was before the internet. We operated a trucking company in half our last 25 years. Convenience stores, and here's some pictures of some of our newer stores. We've opened 4 in Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas, in the last around 18 months, for a total of 30. We've owned an oil and gas drilling company with 5 drilling rigs drilling in West Texas and Western Oklahoma. An oil rig moving company, because you have to have something to move the rigs. Grocery store, oil and gas mineral company, a financial publishing company in Singapore, did not do well. We've owned radio stations for over 30 years in Enid. We started a statewide news and ag network throughout Oklahoma. The Christ tree, as Dr. Rangel mentioned, we brought to Enid, Oklahoma. A leasing company, Sonic Drive-In, Subways. Commercial real estate development. Soon to be announced executive producers for a Christmas, faith-based Christmas movie called The One. Plus, sponsor of several private placements, Private Family Foundation, International Impact Ministries. These are businesses that we've either started, purchased, or managed over the last 40 years. Each of these businesses has a story. I'm going to give you a few of those stories tonight, about how it was created, the success we had or did not have, and what we've learned.
So here's our story. To say our family backgrounds are very different is an understatement. My family was very structured. Expectations on performance were well known at school and church. Another difference included my upbringing in the Catholic Church and the expectations of attendance at the catechism classes. Both my parents worked, so I never knew a stay-at-home mom. And in fact, starting about the 5th grade, when I would ride the bus home and get home from school, I would fix dinner for the family, and my mom did the dishes. After graduation from high school, I went 3.5 hours away from college. I lived in Ponca City. It was a 3.5 hour drive to Weatherford, and I never went back home until Christmas break. And even after that, I continued my studies during the summer months at Weatherford. And it was during my college year that I had a classroom roommate that was from Fairview. Well, Fairview was an hour away, and Weatherford shuts down on the weekend. So I would go to Fairview, and that's where I met my husband.
Carol's structured, I'm unstructured. My father lost my older brother Mark in 1961. He was killed by a truck driven by a state of Virginia worker in Covington, Virginia. My dad received a $5,000 insurance policy. My dad would, if he was alive today, would still tell you what the judge says. No amount of money can bring back your son. Here's $5,000. My dad grew up in poverty of the Great Depression. He would always tell me, he said, we grew up in the poorest of the poor. You think who the poor is? He said, that's us. Never received a birthday present until he's about 8 years old, and on his birthday, someone gave him a set of guitar strings. No guitar, but guitar strings. But my dad took that money in 1962, January 1st, opened the Dairy Boy restaurant and drive-in in Fairview, Oklahoma. It was in the winter, cold. There's a little drive-in that you walk up and they have 2 little windows, they raise them up, make you hamburger ice cream. My dad bought that. His first year, he said he made 4 times the money he'd been working for with a petty company doing geographic surveying across the country. 4 times. My dad worked hard. And on the winters, he would drive to Enid and he would mortgage his car for $50 to get through the winter in the drive-in because business wasn't very good. Within a few years, he was buying a new drive-in. Then he was buying another drive-in. And before long, my dad had 11 drive-in restaurants called Mug and Jugs. Like that name, Mug and Jugs. Andy will remember that. Cole made her own root beer.
Root beer floats.
Yeah, and he would drive, and going from Woodward all the way to Siloam Springs and Van Buren, Arkansas. My dad had no education, but he worked hard. So I grew up in a very unstructured. My mom struggled with alcoholism. What I didn't tell you is when my brother was killed, my mom asked Mark to walk across the street to get some more balloons. And she watched him get hit and died. So no wonder my mom struggled with alcoholism. So I've got a workaholic dad who's gone. I've got a mom who's struggling with a guilt that you can only imagine from seeing that happen and knowing that you asked him to go across the street. I didn't have somebody home. I didn't have a curfew. I didn't learn a lot of good habits. But that's the unstructured environment I started with. And Carol, when she said structured, very structured. So as you can imagine, a little bit of a rough start, maybe. Anybody that's married here probably can disagree and just smile a little bit. But my dad never gave up on us. And when we needed that help to get that next convenience store, he believed in us.
Kyle and I married between my sophomore and junior year at Southwestern, where I majored in microbiology and chemistry. Just another little difference in our relationship. We've never worked together.
We work together, but we don't work together.
As we mentioned before, during my junior year, I would open one of the convenience stores there in Fairview at 5 a.m. And then I would drive an hour down to Southwestern and do my didactic, finish my didactic there. And my senior year was an internship at St. Mary's Regional Medical Center, where I was required to be in the nursery at 4 a.m. But I lived 45 minutes away, so we were getting up at 3 a.m. He was running the milk route at 3 a.m. I was driving to Enid to do the nursery earlies that I was required to be a part of. And then it was after graduation that I was 4 months pregnant with our first child, and now I was board certified as a medical technologist. Unfortunately, there were no jobs available.
So we moved to Enid, bought a house, and as we every evening would walk, we worried about how we were going to make that house payment. $438 a month. That was a lot of money back then, 1986. But Carol and I worked together as a partner, And I will tell you, Carol and I've had our share of struggles. That's a whole different topic. But we work together, and God paired me with a partner, my best friend, who is a support person like my father was for us. She never says, "You can't do that, you idiot." She's supportive. We took hold and started expanding our business, buying convenience stores. And how did we buy some of the stores we bought? It was basically just by listening. And listening is a very important part. As I end tonight, we're going to talk about some of the lessons learned. We started growing our business. Then we had an opportunity to buy radio stations in Enid. I get this all the time. Has your family always been in radio? I said, no. Well, how'd you get in the business? They were for sale. So we buy them. That's a lot of how we bought businesses. They were for sale. There was no overarching, brilliant idea. In fact, none of it makes any sense. Urgent cares, convenience stores, oil and gas drilling. What are you doing? It doesn't make any sense. But as we were growing our business, I hit a streak of 3 really bad deals. And I came home one evening and I said, Carol, I can't take a salary for the next year. No fights, no what did you do, but basically we just went to work. We lived on our salary. We'd always lived under our means, so it was easy to do. But I've always appreciated the fact that my wife was there with me. Not to condemn me, but to do what my father would do, to support me and encourage me.
It took some time, but Kyle and I realized in our marriage that he's the visionary and I'm the detail person. So I come around and clean up behind him a lot. But about 5 years into our marriage, he had this thought of owning a travel agency so we could have all the perks of I ought to travel. And I realize maybe the younger people here don't understand the benefit of that because the travel agency has changed with so much online booking, but it was a big deal back then. We had free airline tickets, we had $50 a day cruises. It was wonderful. But the perks we enjoyed were nice, but I can't say that the business was that profitable. But today, we are glad that there was the opportunity to experience a new, diverse thing, to see something that works really well, something that was okay, and we're just grateful for what we learned out of that experience.
I mentioned listening and how you get into business and opportunities that are out there. Several convenience stores we bought were because I would hound our vendors and say, do you know any stores for sale? And then finally one day he said, yeah, I know there's a great little store up in Newkirk. Some of you may know where Newkirk is, K County. So I called the owner and she said, we were going to, Linda Smith was her name, we were going to sell, we decided against it. I said, okay, well thank you, Linda. A year later, out of the blue, I thought about her. So I called her. She said, I think we might. So we bought her business and I hired her as my manager. The ROI on that business to recoup our investment was 7 months. Not that I'm smart, but we saw an opportunity of things that were left undone. In 2004, a friend of ours, Sherry LeMunion, saw her at church one day and she said, Kyle, would you go have lunch with Dana, her husband? He's depressed. Now my friend Dana had created an oil and gas drilling company in the 90s and sold it to UTI Patterson, a public company, for many millions of dollars. And he had taken a 5-year non-compete. But he was wanting to get back into business. But things had changed a lot. Things had got a lot more expensive. So I'd call Dana and try to get him to have lunch with me or coffee with me, and he wouldn't do it. Well, turns out I was co-chairing a capital campaign at Oklahoma Bible Academy to raise money for a new field house. And I think he might have thought I was trying to raise money. And you know, when you're trying to raise money, a lot of times people don't take the phone calls. But anyway, I kept calling, and then I'd see Sherry somewhere else, and she said, Kyle, please call him. We had a respect relationship. It wasn't a good friendship relationship, close at all. We respected one another, what we have done. Finally, he said, okay. So we had agreed to have breakfast at the We Too restaurant. It's a little dive in Enid. And great food, though. Great food. So I go there and with the intent to speak and encourage a friend. I sat there for an hour and a half because Dana can talk. I can talk. An hour and a half, he told me about what he was wanting to do, wanting to get started, but he just didn't have the money to do it. And I sat there, and finally I said, hey, I think my dad and I will invest with you. And I remember, I quote him, he said, you would? 2 weeks later, well, the next day, I called my friend Lauren Rigger. Lauren is president of Farmers Exchange Bank in Cherokee, Oklahoma. I called Lauren. I asked him the question. I said, Lauren, have you ever financed an oil and gas drilling rig? He said, yes. Now, the next most important question was it a good experience or a bad experience? He said, I've had both. I said, we're going to come see you. 2 weeks later, we had a $2.5 million loan, and off we were running to start Lemunion Drilling. That business happened because I said yes to Sherry saying, go encourage my husband. I wasn't intending, never even thought about it until I'm sitting there listening to someone pour out his heart. We built 5 drilling rigs, triples if you're into oil and gas drilling stuff, top drives to a total depth of 16,500 feet. Horizontals can kick out 8,000 feet as a horizontal well. But it was a great business, but it all came about just by listening to someone and saying, yes, I'll reach out to them.
So my visionary husband envisioned something we thought impossible. This is froze, it's not words.
There you go.
Oh, there it is, okay. The world's tallest Christmas tree in Enid, Oklahoma. So many questions would be answered after Kyle proposed this idea. But where there's a will, there's a way, especially when it's God honoring. And what I would like to say to you about that is that this sits on Park Street in Enid, Oklahoma. And when you do something God honoring, what happens? Satan tries to attack it. And so they wanted to sue us for doing a Christian-based event in this area. We had the support of the fathers of the city of Enid, and Park Street is now a free speech zone. So we were able to have that and overcome the lawsuits that were coming against this. But then we were like, okay, how do we transport a 140-foot Christmas tree from Northern California to Enid, Oklahoma? We hired a forestry expert, Dr. McKinley, and I can remember during one of the meetings trying to figure out how do we transport this thing. He was like, well, we could put it on a jumbo jet, but that's $250,000 to fly it to Enid, Oklahoma. Where do you land it? But God works everything out for us, and so we just happened to have these windmills in Oklahoma. And do you know how long a windmill blade is? It's 120. But we can put a 140-foot tree on there. Tachyon donated. They drove to Northern California, picked up the tree, and brought it into Enid. And this is a picture of our legacy tree. We did the live tree for the first 2 years. And the first year, that broke off at about 27 feet.
127.
Yeah, 127 feet. And we were able to overcome that. We put the top back on, to overcome some of these things. But today, we've also turned this into a legacy project. And this is a picture from last year. It was our 3rd year. And it's been a huge success. We anticipate when we do opening night that we have about 30,000 people present at that opening night. We have caroling and concerts and food vendors and all of that. And it's been so successful, you know what happens? You get a drone show. Have you all seen, was it America's Got Talent that had the drone show? This is the same company.
That's 1,000 drones. It was the largest drone show in the state of Oklahoma.
Do you know what it costs to put 1,000 drones in the air? They did it for free. God will bless what you do.
The backstory to that is I almost blew it on the drone show. They called us and said, hey, we want to do the drone show and we want to do this, Grinch and stealing a Christmas tree, and then Grinch's heart being changed, and then bringing the tree back, having him go down and touch the tree, and it illuminates back. But they had to get approval from Universal Florida. They kept saying they were going to get it. Kept saying they were going to get it, couldn't get it. Finally, they said, oh, well, we have a backup. And this is where it's tricky. They said, it's a Nightmare Before Christmas. I haven't even heard of that. I bet you most of you have not either. Some of you have. So I started Googling it. My daughters are going like, this doesn't fit. This is a fit to go along with a Christ tree, which we're trying to subtly remind people why we celebrate Christmas. So I called them and said, can't do that, it doesn't fit. And they kept saying, why? I didn't ask for the drone show, so I was willing to let it go. So we said, can't do it. They went radio silent on me for 2 weeks. And I was like, what are we gonna do? I hadn't told anybody. Then they came back and said, we'll do a traditional Christmas show. We did this in the middle of the week with volunteers. I can't describe it. Pictures don't do it justice. We had a biggest crowd, and it's probably, we're hopefully closer to 50,000 this year for Christmas. We had almost as big a crowd for the drone show on a Wednesday night, but it was absolutely incredible. So God once again honored this by us saying, like, I'm not doing that. Yeah, we're traditional Christmas, and I'm not keeping Santa Claus out of the area. But that was going way too far because the reviews were really, really bad. Next up, in 2013, I have 2 older brothers. Both are doctors. Oldest brother is retired colonel in the Air Force, a neurologist. And my next older brother is 4 years older than me, family practice doctor in Elk City, Oklahoma, had delivered about 1,100 babies. Scott was in the convenience store business 25 years before that with us. But we bought him out when he said he wanted to go back to medical school. My brother had 3 close friends in medical school who, in Oklahoma City, started an urgent care company and over 12 years built 9 clinics. It was Access Medical. They're still in Oklahoma City today. Scott was having lunch with his friends and they said, I think we sold too soon. So we thought about that a little bit. And Scott and I started doing some investigation, and all the urgent cares, or majority of them, were going into big metropolitan markets. We saw an opportunity. We said, people need health care when they need health care, at different times of the day, weekends, holidays. So I had just hired a couple new gentlemen to our company, in our convenience store company. We invited them to go with us to the Urgent Care Association annual meeting in Orlando, Florida. So the 4 of us flew down, went to the meeting, and everybody was talking about, you guessed it, metropolitan markets. We go, okay, we can do this. My brother and I that day decided, and this was the number we pulled out, this is amazing. So we're gonna build 40. Well, we have 30 convenience stores, so it seems reasonable that we could do something like that. So we got property under construction, and in 2014, I think it was April of 2014, we opened in Enid, Oklahoma. In May, we opened in Elk City. In September, we opened in Weatherford. In December, we opened in Shawnee. We opened up 4 clinics in 1 year. The next year, we opened up 4 more, then we opened up 2 the following year, and we decided to let's let things kind of set. We had 10 clinics. Very popular, tons of patients, great success. We decided to test the water, saying, what our company's value is today. We've been hounded by a lot of investment bankers. Did an analysis, went to market, and sure enough, we had a high valuation. So we brought in a private equity partner who bought part of our company, and they took over day-to-day management and blew us up from 10 to 58. Late summer, this was fun. I mean, I have to tell you, this is fun. I've never done anything like this, but it's like, wow, I'm gonna do that again. We had over 100 companies, medical companies, private equity groups around the country look at us. We sold those 58 clinics to Goldman Sachs, one of the largest investment banks in the world. And then what was also fun is we had some of our friends stay in the deal on a small basis, and we had at least one billionaire family as part of the investment into our company. I just think that's fun. When we had started from scratch, we were serving about 600,000 patients a year. 600,000 people who didn't have to go spend $1,500 to $2,000 in the ER. And they spent about $150 on average with us. That benefits them financially. It benefits them from having the time to be able to get their family to the doctor and get health care. And God honored that. And that is absolutely fun to do. My brother took care of the medical. I took care of the financial and the real estate. And our other 2 minor partners took care of the kind of the grinding and the operational stuff. But it was such a fun time. But once again, we were listening when someone said, I think I sold too soon. And they were right. Because the number we got sold for was like 10 times what they sold for.
So what did we learn through all of this? And in my opinion, one of the greatest things that we have learned is due with delayed gratification. You probably weren't able to notice in that first slide that we brought up our car tags. My car tag, Grateful 2, is on the back of a BMW. But that's not how it started. I'm going to tell you the story of a little red Plymouth Horizon. You see, when we got married and I was commuting to Southwestern for my didactic, I did that in a 1969 Cutlass, and it was pretty rough. So after commuting for about a semester, we found a used red Plymouth Horizon for sale, and we bought it. And boy, was it nice. Had air conditioning even. And so I had a little break between my didactic and my internship, and I was working at that first convenience store that we owned. We lived in Fairview. The convenience store was in Ringwood. And we found one of the good money-making things at the store in Ringwood was fried chicken. The oil field workers would come in and load up for their work out in the field all day, and we sold a lot of fried chicken. And we discovered the most economical way to do this was to buy a case of cut chicken from a local grocer in Fairview, and we would take it to the store in Ringwood. Do you know why you have plastic baggies by the chicken counter in the grocery store? Chicken juice. You can't put a case of chicken in those baggies. So guess what we had in the back of the Horizon? Now, do you know what chicken juice smells like after it sits in a hot car? That nice new Plymouth Horizon stunk so bad. We worked so hard to clean chicken.
We never got it out, ever. Ever. It was bad.
But it was delayed gratification. The good Lord knew I didn't need a nice luxury car to be crating chickens around town.
Now for the entrepreneur students, I don't recommend some of the things necessarily, but for us and for myself, I'm a generalist. I'm not a specialist. Don't have a degree, probably couldn't pass any of your classes. But a generalist learns how to utilize lots of things. I was telling Dr. Jansen earlier today, it's like playing chess or playing college football. Your first year as a freshman in college football, everything is so fast. By the time you're a senior, it's slowed down and you know what you're doing. So I had to be a generalist and learn how to use accounting, entity structure, banking, real estate, every little thing I could in order to succeed in business. In the radio broadcasting business, we answer to the FCC. Corporation Commission regulates our trucking, our fuel distribution. So you have to know and learn a lot of these different things. So learning to, and that fits my ADD, I'm just being honest, it just does, because I can't get down to that. But I'm a generalist. Most of you will be specialists, which is perfect as well, because you will be experts in certain things. In the urgent care, I could handle the banking, the finance, the real estate, the construction, all of that. That was easy for me. My brother didn't ask me how to treat patients. They had certain protocols. But the one thing I will tell you for myself is that you don't have to know everything to start. You just start. I went home and told our children, you can find this on YouTube, it's the one documentary, it's about a 45 minutes long, 30 to 45 minutes long. When I told my children, adult children, we're gonna bring the world's tallest Christmas tree in, and they're like, yeah. And then they're like, uh-oh, Dad's onto something. And we did. Step by step, we figured it out. First thing, got a Christmas tree expert from OSU. What kind of tree do we need? We needed a true fir. Where are you gonna get it? Well, it's probably Northern California. We just took step by step in faith, and it was absolutely stunning what happened. I want to close with just some general lessons that we've learned over 40 years of succeeding. I've lost a lot of money in a lot of deals I didn't mention tonight. Singapore financial publishing business. Sonic wasn't a great deal either. As Carol mentioned, delaying gratification. You need margin in your life. Margin in your life isn't if you qualify for $100,000. If you think you can do a $100,000 mortgage and the bank says no, you can do 200. You don't do 200. You do what you think you can do. But you need to have margin in your life so you can save for college. You can have vacations. But delaying gratification is so important. I can't just, it is penultimate of all the things you're gonna do. You gotta be patient. And the Lord gave Carol my patience, and I'm grateful for that. Surround yourself with great people. Oh my gosh. And demand that they add value into your business, to your marriage, to your life. That means accountants. What's your accountant bringing you? What is your attorney bringing you? Got a couple examples, and I'll be brief here. An example of an accountant bringing value, and I'm gonna leave the numbers out, but they're good. We took over a 20-acre development from the city of Enid at Cleveland and ONK Gary, for those of you who know where that's at, and you've been there. From the city of Enid, had 27 houses on it. We took down those 27 houses, relat the plat, established new utilities, sold off the out parcels, and then donated 7.5 acres to the city of Enid so they could bring in a retail development. My accountant says, if you donate that land within 1 year of acquiring that land, your tax deduction will be your basis. How much do you have in it? Well, we did this deal pretty good. So we might have had $400,000 tax deduction. But she said, if you wait over a year, now you can do an appraised value. So how do you get an appraised value? It's based on comps. Well, we had sold the properties, specifically the bank property, at a very high number per square foot. So we got about 8 times the tax deduction by waiting. We wouldn't have known that. We would have just donated it back to the city because we had it squared off, give it back to the city. That's someone that has value. She does every tax return for every entity, every trust, anything we do, she takes care of because she sees the overall picture. That's surrounding yourself with good people, good attorneys, good bankers, good counsels, good consultants. If you know the most in your company, you got a problem because there's smarter people out there. We watched our private equity people come in out of Dallas. It was amazing. Those are some smart people. And actually they were good guys too. Not all private equity is that way. Never stop learning. I read a lot of books. I'm a newsletter junkie. I spend a lot of money on subscriptions, but I love to learn. I just love that. Work with people. Everything you do in life is in and through people. Learn how to get along with people. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. That's the best learning. When I'm successful, I get lazy, fat, sloppy. But when things go against you, you refine. It's when your character's molded and you get better. And the last thing is something that Carol and I realized that has dramatically changed our lives. It's learn to say yes. About 16 years ago, Carol and I were invited to go to Ecuador with a Christian radio ministry. Since we had radio stations and we had supported some Christian radio stations abroad, we decided to go, so we went. We came back, and I remember specifically, we said, we need to give a gift for another radio station, but God wasn't leading us to a specific country. So we asked our good friend Heidi Jones at HCJB, which is now Reach Beyond. We said, Heidi, what do you think we should give the money? And she said, it's not sexy. That was her quote. But she said, there's this really great ministry in southern Poland. I'd have never thought of Poland. Last place I'd have thought. So we made the gift, and the Lord kind of works on you, and 6 months later we're saying, I think we need to go see what they're doing. So we flew to Poland in March, and our eyes were wide open, and we found the most incredible ministry, broad-based ministry, evangelical ministry in a primary Catholic country. And it was phenomenal. Carol and I have been there 8 times. 8 times. We've been to Africa, to Niger 8 times. None of that happens if we had not said yes. We went with people we did not know, and our hearts were changed. Our life was changed. Our life was changed. Our businesses, we passed out a few books this morning to some of the students. It was a book called The Treasure Principle by Randy Alcorn. I'm sure many of you probably have read it or seen it. And one of the treasure principles, the one I quote the most, says that God does not prosper you to increase your standard of living. God prospers you to increase your standard of giving. There's responsibility. Great wealth demands great responsibility. So I just challenge you to say yes to life. When someone calls you and says, would you go have coffee? Go have coffee. When someone calls, says, would you give to this? Do what you can, even if it's by prayer. That our lives have been changed by saying yes to God. We didn't know it was Him, but it makes an incredible difference. So that wraps up our part tonight. Happy to answer any questions. You can give most of those questions to Carol.
What sparked your interest in bringing the largest Christmas tree to Enid?
You know, Andy, on my computer, I love Christmas. I love Christmas. And I was on there reading about California. They had this 120-foot Christmas tree at San Clemente, you know, and it's nice. It's a shopping mall. I thought, we've been to Rockefeller Center and had the privilege of seeing the Rockefeller Christmas tree. Not everyone can do that. So we said, you know what, we're gonna bring that to Enid. We can bring that because we build things, and we just said, we're gonna do that. So we're going into our 4th year. And as I mentioned just a little bit ago, we got news just about 10 minutes before we started talking this evening about our movie coming up that we're gonna fund and be the executive producer. Executive producer just means you paid for it. There's no talent, although you do get to choose who the leads are. So there are some strings you get to do, but it'll be really fun. But it will be a faith-based, real movie about real life, foster care system, and both of our daughters bawled at the end. So I suspect that I hope to see you guys crying in the movie theaters. So we hope that that'll be out before Thanksgiving next year.
I got an oddball question. Been brewing on this. So you've got a lot of different businesses, and that means you've got to know a lot of different stuff. And you kind of brought up all the reading that you do, and you also brought up listening to people. If you had to kind of guesstimate, how much did you learn from the people, and how much did you learn from the reading? What do you think that ratio is?
That's a great question. I bet 70-30, 70 through people. So I hired a couple guys, probably 11, 12 years ago, Jeff and Brian, who worked for a very large company who had sales of about $1 billion. And I was having everyone come report to me. That doesn't work. You know, you don't need 12 people reporting to you. I needed 2 or 3. So they helped us kind of develop our structure a little bit better, hire more people. So what it allows you to do is be more effective. And these people will specialize in their areas. But it's a great question. I think it's 70%. I learned a lot through reading, but the experience with people and listening, because that's sometimes the hardest thing for me, is I'm not a great listener. But when I do, man, I pick up nuggets. I was telling a story this afternoon about a word that a person said in a meeting, and I remembered it, and it literally was worth millions of dollars. Millions of dollars. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. But it's a good question, thank you.
So you guys have run or managed or purchased a ton of different businesses in a ton of different industries. And I think the question that I have is like you've said, and you've credited those decisions to just saying yes to opportunities when they present themselves, or saying yes to listening to people. But when you are presented with an opportunity in an industry that you have yet to go into, what goes into that decision to say yes to going into that industry if like you don't have experience in that type of business?
Another good question. About 7, maybe 8 years ago, I turned over a new leaf. I said, if we don't scale it, I don't want it. So I don't want businesses that I can't grow rapidly. So that's why we have convenience stores, urgent care going forward. Radio stations doing some expansion. Movies, an example, get into the movie, that part of it, is it's gotta have an ROI that's attractive. You know, it's gotta be something that adds value. This is gonna be a movie centered in Enid, Oklahoma, because I control that. And it's gonna be a good movie. When it comes to Christian, faith-based, and really bringing attention to foster care system. In 2021, when we put up the Christmas tree, Erin Elizabeth Cook, who's our screenwriter, sent me this screenplay. It was about this foster care system, this man aging out, Hawk. What she didn't know is our son and daughter-in-law are foster parents. And they just had a foster daughter that just aged out of the system as well. So you just saw God's hands on that. It's like, oh, how can we not do this? There's a point to this. We can do good with a movie to help raise awareness of what the foster care system is facing. But the other is, so I'm not necessarily selling other things, but I just don't want to have businesses that aren't growing. Because growth for us is the fun part. Growth adds opportunity, growth creates value, and so it's just fun. It is fun. It's hard, but it's fun.
You talked about being a generalist, and allowing the specialists and the people around you to do what they know best, right?
Correct.
What do you consider yourself in terms of your management style when it comes to all these very diverse businesses? Each of them are very specific, they're not like the other. Do you find some commonality between these businesses to manage them and figure them all out, or do you just like go with the flow and when the time comes, let me figure out what management style I'm going to put onto this?
I'm very hands-off. My son, who is the new president of our convenience stores, just promoted on July 1, we'll put it this way, when it comes to convenience stores, he'll say, Dad, you tell us where we're going, I'll get us there. So I look at, an example, when we were looking at where we're expanding, we looked at Kansas, we looked at Mexico, Texas, Missouri, and Arkansas. And we saw a landscape in Arkansas, northwest Arkansas, booming area, not Branson, but Bentonville, Rogers, Fort Smith, Siloam Springs, Springdale, just blowing up. So I just determine where we're gonna go, and then they go down in the field and they make it happen. So Alex is more of a direct manager. I use this term, I stay at around 30,000 feet. I need people at 500 feet. I'm good at charting the area. I am not good at day to day. I'm not. But that's why we hire people that can do that. And that's what Carol does in our family. I've never reconciled a checkbook. Carol does that, and she'll do 15 or 16 every just our personal stuff every month. The other day, she had all spread out over the table doing them. But that's what she does for me as well.
I'm curious about the places where you said the failures. What did you think God was teaching in those situations?
Oh, a lot. In the Singapore publishing deal, I trusted someone too much. And I have a habit of doing that. I'll just believe somebody. That's why I'm a terrible in HR. I try not to hire the majority of our people, because I'll believe, call it like it is. Not a strength, I can tell you that. I think in the first business, in my clothing store, he was just letting me know that not everything is rosy, because everything had been pretty rosy for me, easy for me, and it wasn't. And it was humiliating. I had no clue. None. And I wasn't in a good spot when that finished. But the more we look back, that was God's hand of blessing upon us. Because that taught me a lot. And so you don't make everything good. I mean, you make a lot of mistakes along the way. I mean, there's so many losses, so many things that didn't go well. We adjust our drilling company, for example. This is I think this is rig 1 down by Ponca, Oklahoma. Mast is probably 106 feet tall. We were doing very well. We had just hired an investment banker in Dallas to sell us. So it's like, okay. And then oil prices declined and engineering changed, the engineering requirements for rigs our size, they wanted bigger rigs. We got our cheese moved. And these rigs are standing, 3 of the 5, the other 2 are in the yard. These 3 rigs are standing, 3 of the 5 are, just north of Waukomis. As I said earlier, if anybody would like to buy a drilling rig, come see me after the talk here. So anyway, they're not working. So eventually we'll sell them, but the timing by 6 months probably cost us gazillions. That's just whatever it is. But we look at it this way, if God wanted us to have it, we'd have it. We've had embezzlements. You know, I don't get hung up on those. If we were supposed to have the money, we would. It's not a big deal. Just move on. Anybody else?
I was just wondering, out of all the businesses that you've ever been a part of, which one's been your favorite?
Well, the speed of which we did Xpress Wellness was pretty incredible. When we sold, we were the largest urgent care in Kansas, Oklahoma, and we're making a run for Texas. That was just fun. That was actually executing something perfectly, and that doesn't happen very often, believe me. So that was kind of fun. My heart's in convenience stores. I like people. I'd rather be behind the register, talking to customers. That's what I like. But convenience stores is our largest business, and it's sort of probably my heart is, but just total fun watching Xpress Wellness start from an idea to what we sold at in 10 years. That was fun. But I'll credit our partners, but our private equity partners, well, they were phenomenal. They were good guys. They were good guys. And the travel agency. That was truly Carol. I think Carol's. It did pay a little bit more than what I think her recollection may have been, but the fun part was the travel. I mean, it really was. That was back in the day. We were a large agency. That's back in the day when the reps from the different airlines would come in and they'd just give everybody round trip air tickets anywhere in the world. They would do stuff like that. And like Carol mentioned, $50 and $35 a day cruises per person, just whenever you wanted to. Today, no such thing, no such thing. So we did get out in the right time before the internet took over. So you got 3, not 1.